Herkese merhaba, hoş geldiniz. Bu akşam Yeşil Rapido'nun düzenlediği 2021 konferans serisinin 3. Ve sonuncu panelinde sürdürülebilirlik çerçevesinde mimarinin çevresel etkilerini düşünmeye ve daha sağlıklı bir gelecek için somut öneriler üzerinde konuşmaya devam ediyoruz. İlk oturuma değerli konuğumuz İtalyan mimar Giacomo Garziano'nun biyofilik tasarım odaklı mimari hakkındaki açılış konuşmasıyla başlıyoruz. Now he is going to talk about future architecture through the biophilic lens. Please join me in welcoming Giacomo Garziano. Thank you.
Hi, Banu. Thank you very much for the wonderful presentation, and thank you, Yessi Rapido, for the invitation. And, thank you to the audience of Yessi Rapido to join in. As Banu anticipated, we're going to talk about the biophilic and how we use the biophilic approach throughout our daily practice here in Amsterdam, working internationally. So. Let's start. I would say I will try to give you a very personal insight of my approach to this field. It starts obviously from the biophilic is about the notion of nature. There are two approaches, two perspectives on the notion of nature. One is scientific knowledge, so very empirical, and the other one is let's say philosophical abstraction, more theoretical. I've been throughout let's say my research been interested in both scenarios, and also recent developments in science like quantum physics explores how actually these two notions are pretty close to each other. I was born in a small town in southern Italy called Altamura in Puglia in 1981, and my first experience with nature was very bucolic. You know, I spent a lot of time in nature, working with nature, because every family in southern Italy has a place in the countryside where they grow plants, they harvest. They harvest grapes to make wine. They harvest olives to make olive oil, and I had since I was young a very direct connection with nature, meaning really communicating with nature in order to provide also food for ourselves. So, and I also experience how let's say nature as an entity that is exterior to us, but it's also let's say forging the way we live our daily life. Also experiencing how nature impact even harvesting. If it's planted a specific day and it starts raining, you have to stop. So this kind of interaction with nature is really let's say embedded in my in my youth. And I remember the uncle of my father. He had a very big farm where all animals were free to grow, and we will spend a lot of time there with there as well. So I studied science first of all, and then music. I studied cello at the Conservatory in Matera, which is a town very close to Altamura, 15 kilometers. And at the conservatory, by looking just outside of the window, I could see this view. I really recommend to go to Matera. It's been the capital of culture, European capital of culture in 2019. And the experience I have of this view, you can grasp it maybe a little bit from this picture. I couldn't really understand where nature stopped and where architecture, where the built environment started. In that sense, for me, these two were really colliding. Were really merged together. And this is a knowledge that is an experience that I always kept within myself. Till the point that I moved to Florence to study architecture. It has been my dream since I was 6 years old. I informed my parents that I wanted to go to Florence to study architecture, and well, that happened. And I spent 8 years there, and yeah, this is the landscape I had to deal when going outside of Florence where I studied. So kind of similar landscape, but much more green, much more flourishing, and where again the relationship between nature and the built environment was very special. Throughout my studies, I had the chance to explore a field that is really dear to me, which is actually music. And well, in the Renaissance, the experience of the design of a lot of buildings was actually based on mathematical proportions, golden ratio, but also music ratios. So this church, Santa Maria Novella in Florence, was actually conceived in a way that could be an harmonic facade. But the real, let's say, the real breakthrough in my education was when I visited for school this building. It's the Sagrestia Nuova by Michelangelo in Florence. Well, this facade, there are 4 facades, and this one represents the statue of Lorenzo de' Medici. It's like the chapel with the tombs of the Medici family. There is Lorenzo de' Medici with the sunset and sunrise at his feet. Well, to me, when I entered this building for the first time, I felt a building was actually talking to me, was singing to me. The proportions of the different elements, the color, the different materials were, let's say, like a symphony to me. So I started exploring this field deeper and deeper. I felt this could be my mission. And so I ended up, throughout the research, finding my guru, who is Yannis Xenakis, a Greek architect, mostly known for his work with Le Corbusier. He was working for Le Corbusier. And this project specifically, that you probably know, is the Philips Pavilion for the Brussels Expo in 1958, was actually literally a translation of a music piece that he composed 4 years before called Metastasis. And the way you see on the right side, you see actually a music score that he made for the specific music. And through hyperbolic paraboloids, he transformed the music into the space. It was another revelation for me of how music and architecture could be combined together, could inform each other even. And then still in Florence, which obviously it's known for the Renaissance architecture, show me actually examples of Art Nouveau, which was also groundbreaking for me. So on one side, I experienced how music can inform architecture, and on the other side, through Art Nouveau, I experienced how nature could inform architecture. And I saw similarities in between. For instance, the Sagrestia Nuova you saw before with this building, where all the elements are communicating with each other in an harmonic way, with a lot of natural symbolisms and natural elements in the facade. So this is, let's say, when I started questioning how actually my passions, music and nature could be combined together through architecture, and starting analyzing deeper and deeper, I found out there's a lot of studies regarding this topic. And actually, the main connector between music and nature is actually geometry, is mathematics. On the left side, you see a drawing from Johannes Kepler, who actually it's a representation of how the 6 planets known at the time could be translated into Platonic solids, in the 6 Platonic solids. And on the right side, you see a representation of the Musica Universalis, which is basically the music score that the planets, the orbits of the planets, are performing in space. For me, it was yeah, it's really poetic at the same time, but also yeah, it's also pretty much interesting, and I always try to relate to this concept. We talked about the notion of nature before, and let's say a way also to approach it, which is let's say a combination of the two, the scientific and the philosophical that we tackled before. It stays actually in the etymology of the word. The word comes from Latin, which is natura, which literally means to be born. So it could, you know, it could represent the world as we know it, our planet, but it could also mean the universe. So with this, let's say, information at the back of my mind, I started investigating how actually nature shows itself through mathematics and the mathematical formulas and to music. And this is where my journey as an architect actually started, trying to combine the notion of music and architecture and nature together. This was my actually thesis, my diploma design in 2008, where these 3 elements were combined together. I designed a school of music and the auditorium, opera house for 1,800 people. And by then, let's say, my approach tended to explore even more in depth the relation that architecture has to nature, informed again through mathematical formulas. So my journey, it began, let's say, when I finished my diploma in 2008, exploring the possibilities of incorporating and merging these 3 different fields. And let's look a bit at what biophilia means. So it's there's an interesting book that Henri David Thoreau wrote called Walden. It's his experience, isolated from the world, basically living in the middle of a forest, and he explains the relationship he developed with nature. It's sometimes frightening because, of course, nature can be dangerous as well, but it's really informative. The first person who ever mentioned the word biophilia is actually Erich Fromm. In 1984. Wilson developed the concept further of biophilia until 1993. Keller, together with Wilson, they published this what I consider the Bible of the biophilia, which is the biophilia hypothesis. It's very interesting because it explains scientifically our relationship, let's say genetically, background as well, our relation to nature. Etymologically, biophilia means bio means life, basically, living systems, and the philia means love, affiliation, attraction, affinity, tendency. So literally, it translates into love for life at large, love for life and living systems. But my first encounter ever with the let's say with the field, where my research started in 2008, but I had no idea that there was Keller, there was Wilson writing about it. So my first encounter was actually the album Biophilia by Björk. I thought that I actually brought also here for you to see. And I actually thought that it was a concept that she developed herself. Well, you know how creative Björk is. I thought she developed the concept in order to merge nature, music, and technology. She even developed with a team of app developers. She developed the first app where the listener could actually interact with the music, could even somehow compose the music that he or she was listening to. So after my first encounter, but what actually biophilia or biophilic architecture means, or what can do for us. We acknowledge that our cities are getting much more, more and more dense. At least some are becoming more dense. But there's also this idea of the compact city, and the way to make it sustainable for us has been also in the past explored quite extensively. We saw also in this slide a representation by Wright in 1958 about let's say a utopian city where nature and the urban environment merged together. It was called the Brotaker City, which of course was never developed, but you know, the idea of, or the urge, the need to merge nature and the city has always been interesting for architects to explore. There's an interesting phenomenon. While the cities are actually being more and more dense, there's also a tendency for more and more people to abandon cities. So why is that? And I think what the biophilic approach does is actually to rebalance these two opposite tendencies. There's a very interesting research here in the Netherlands at the Wageningen University trying to explain why this drive is happening. Is it just for you know, rural romanticism, like in England some time ago, some centuries ago, or it's actually a physical need that our body is asking to us for restoration? So more and more researches are being developed throughout the year in this regard. And in the end, there are different ways to look at the biophilic architecture, but there are also ways to identify. So is biophilic architecture an architecture that is integrated into nature, like the falling water from Wright? Or is it actually nature integrated in a building, like the Bosco Verticale from Stefano Boeri in Milan? Or it's actually the two together? How can we translate through biomimicry? How can we, let's say, incorporate green and develop a natural language within a built environment? This question, maybe the answer, I'll leave it up to you. I would like you to be critical on this, and maybe at the end of this presentation, you will be more aware of which one of these two is actually the most correct ones. And also the fields, as we saw before, biophilia informed also music, but also other fields and also different scales. Let's say we have the urban scale. There's a Singapore. It's becoming really a benchmark in the biophilic approach. It's not really only about buildings by themselves, but like the political program of Singapore is to create a city in the garden, which is something extremely innovative. And the scale so can go from you know, urban development till the scale of the industrial product. On the right, we see a beautiful product developed in Italy by Ecolux, which is actually replicating the sunlight through advanced technology in LED lighting. And the way to let's say certify that also, so to identify and certify a project or a design that is biophilic is actually being developed in the last years through various organizations and with the various certifications, which anybody could apply throughout the design process, but also at the end for validation. But let's go more, let's say, into depth in what actually biophilic architecture or design means. So there are basically three main categories. This is also a way to identify actually our biophilic architecture. There are two, let's say, macro groups that contains in total 15 parameters to follow. So the first one is actually nature in space. It means whatever can be incorporated as a natural element. So natural systems. It can be literally green, but it can be also elements that are related to nature, aesthetically and so visually, but also multisensory, for instance. And natural analogs relates obviously to the similarities that the design could have with nature. It can be indirect, let's say, evocations of patterns, objects, and colors and shapes that exist in nature. And then the last one, which I think, in my perspective, is the hardest to achieve, but also the most, let's say, the most interesting in a way. It's the nature of space. Literally translates into recreating the experience that you could have in a natural environment. For instance, to be able to see beyond the landscape, or even to feel the experience of being, for instance, in a cave. These are all, let's say, experiences that one could create within a biophilic project. So these are all the 15 parameters that I mentioned before, divided in these three macro groups, and I would like to go through them as quickly as possible. During also, I could talk about this forever, but I would like to show you these 15 principles applied to our first project realized in Amsterdam. It was a very interesting journey for us. It was our first experience and experiment as well with the biophilic approach. And we literally went through all these 15 parameters, trying to adapt our design and to these 15 parameters. So let's start from the beginning, where nature in space. The first parameter is the visual connection with nature. We were lucky that the location of our project had this wonderful, natural element of the water in the direct proximity. So let's say the whole project was literally inspired by this main element. You see on the left of the slide actually what all the benefits of these specific parameters are. So the visual connection with nature is mostly related to the presence of nature in the space. We provided throughout the whole building of exterior spaces where nature could naturally grow, of course. So balconies, terraces are all part of the design, deck terraces throughout, around the whole building. So they could provide a natural environment for plants and not only flora but also fauna to grow. And connected still to this parameter is actually the visual of natural elements that could also be simply the flying birds around the building. The building is completely open to the exterior in order to provide this direct connection with all the elements of the around the building. Non-visual connection with nature obviously related to all the other senses that are present, that could be experienced throughout the space. The advantage of using wood or natural materials in general is that they trigger, they stimulate other senses. In this specific case, for instance, the different kinds of wood that we use in the building, they also have a different smell. So imagine to be standing on the deck of this, on this balcony, and you could smell the Western red cedar, which has a a particularly sweet smell compared to the interior, which is pine wood, which is much more, let's say sharp. And also, yeah, this experience throughout the space keeps on changing. This is also a very important element of the biophilic approach, the experience of the space that naturally changes throughout the time. The not rhythmic sensory stimuli relates it to the, let's say, unpredictability of the nature. So the way that light could change within the buildings. Again, the fact that we opened completely the building, exposing, let's say, the interior to the natural light, filtered by the louvers that we're going to see more in depth the system later, fulfill fully the third parameter of this macro group. You can see always throughout the building how the experience changes according to where you're sitting or where you're standing in the building. You know, the difference of temperature, for instance, the difference of light, the difference of all the natural elements that are connected to the building itself is always different. Even because of the surface of the wood, the way the light touches the surface always creates different effects, like you see in this specific picture. And then one other aspect is the thermal and airflow variability. The fact that we conceive the space as let's say a rhythm, a flow of different kinds of spaces, provides also differences in the ventilation, the airflow throughout the building. So the front side and the back side, of course, they provide different kinds of thermal and airflow variability, according also to the presence of the sun. And the fact that there are higher spaces and lower spaces, this also increased this feeling, like if you would be basically outdoor. This is let's say the main element that we try to provide during the experience of the space. Another very important element, which as I explained before, we were let's say lucky to have in the proximity, is the presence of water. You can see how let's say looking at water, like we have now at my back, releases stress and increase the tranquility, lower the heart rate, and also improves concentration and restores memory and other very positive aspects. The interesting aspects of the biophilic approach, actually, it doesn't surprise me that they've been adopted pretty quickly by big corporations, because let's say the biophilic environment improves attention and also productivity. So for instance, it doesn't surprise me that Google immediately let's say designed their spaces according to these principles, in order to improve the quality of the working environment, but also the productivity of the employees. As I mentioned, the presence of the water was really important for the project, and let's say all the interiors, wherever you are standing in the building, you're always able to look outside of the building towards the water side. The louvers are inclined in a way that could protect for privacy and to preserve, to optimize, let's say, light irradiation inside the building, but provides at the same time the perfect view towards the water constantly throughout the building. And of course, the light, because the building is completely open, was one of the key elements of the project. We're going to see how we actually worked out by studying, let's say, the sun exposure throughout the year. We defined the perfect light condition inside the building through the design of the louvers outside. So you will see how we go from very open, where the vertical connections are, to very closed, where privacy was needed, and let's say, the perpendicularity of the building towards the south needed the building to be screened. And then when we turn around the building, going more towards the north, the building opens up again, because of course there is more shadow. So you see how the building, even from outside, interacts differently from its environment. You see especially how inside the building the light has a huge impact. I will show you a little video of what happens inside of the building. You see how the lights actually draws constantly differently the space throughout the whole year. And you see also how the color changes. This was shot during the afternoon, so you see at the end of the day how much more let's say orange the atmosphere is. This also helps to prepare for sleep, actually. So in general, connection to the natural systems is much related to the materials that are used. For instance, let's say the aging of the building is strictly connected also to our perception of it. It creates a sort of social cohesion between the experience and the building. The pattern of time. This building is now. The material outside has been aging over time, so it has been changing. And then let's enter the second macro group related to the natural analogs of the biophilic approach. One of the most important elements is the biomimicry, how we actually extracted information from nature that is around the building and incorporated in the design. The shapes that we used throughout the exteriors and the interior as well, they refer clearly to the water or the wind. So wavy, curvy. This is really beneficial for the experience of the building and the well-being of the user. The material connection with nature, where it actually is embedded in the material itself. The fact that the wood has a certain aspect, certain materiality that is also immediately relatable to the, for instance, a forest or wood is very important. In that sense, we also try to recreate a connection with the environment because of the presence of the water. We imagine to recreate the ship on the land. So we used exactly the same material that the area, that we've been inspired by, because the area was actually a river before. It's not natural land. So then the complexity and order of the design is also part that it's a principle that is always present in nature. So with the complexity of the facade that is also distributed in a very ordered way, is also let's say similar to the way nature actually acts. The third macro group is what I mentioned before, is the most, let's say, most difficult to grasp, and it relates to the experience of the place. We have in Freebooter a very large perspective towards the, let's say, the outer of the building to the exterior of the building, but we also have more compact space within the building that gives you that gives us a cuckoo feeling, and also other spaces that, let's say, they are chained in a way that creates let's say buffer space that somehow increases our imagination of a mystery feeling, like in specific corridors where the light is actually acting in the building in a very different way. The presence of exterior space and interior space, for instance, this corridor you see on the right, it connects all the rooms that we have inside, also from outside. And then the risk and peril, for instance, this also increases dopamine throughout the building. You can achieve that in, let's say, spaces where there's a feeling of risk that is followed by a feeling of tranquility. For instance, being standing in a transparent, on a transparent, next to a transparent glass, gives you first the feeling of falling, for instance, but then the safety of having a solid surface where to lean against. So this difference in the experience produces dopamine and increases the well-being of the user. The last principle that is not official yet, but it's going to be soon, is the awe. Is basically the wow effect, and I think we try to achieve that throughout the building, creating this super open space that is in direct connection with the natural elements of its environment. So I would like to talk about also the design process, how it went, because actually, well, this building was obviously conceived for its users. So when we designed this building, we aimed to create a low ecological footprint building, putting always at the center the user, and by developing let's say the project next to all the stakeholders, we were able also to optimize the construction process and to have perfect control over the construction. So in the end, let's say what we managed to achieve throughout the process was a very smooth process, construction process that was conceived actually in 18 months, but in 3 weeks we were able to build the whole building, the structure, and in 6 months. Turnkey, the clients could move in directly in the building. The technology that we developed that we used for building this project was obviously BIM, in order to have control over the whole construction. And you see how wood was pretty much the main element of the building. This was actually 3 weeks development of the construction and the final product. The impact that this building has on the environment is very low. Wood is the only material that actually sequesters CO2. And if you want to compare it to the usage of a car, this building offsets 700,000 kilometers of let's say a mid-range car, or the electricity consumption of 87 households per year. Following the release of this project, as has been anticipated before, we won several awards. And this led us to develop another project further, which is mitosis. The city in the garden, the concept that we developed, that we tackled before in one of the slides. Mitosis was conceived, it's inspired by the, let's say, the biological process that happens when the cell splits. And this was our main reference to develop the concept of mitosis. So it's a regenerative ecosystem where the inhabitants can work, can live, can do all their activities in one place only. So it's a modular system where we can, through a parametric system, we could, develop at different scales, going from extra large to very small. We could develop, let's say, an ideal city where inhabitants can coexist in let's say in a collective housing atmosphere. Let's say the regenerative approach is actually supported by the increased biodiversity of the area. This automatically, as we described before, proven by scientific research, actually it improves the well-being of its inhabitants. The bio-based material is, as we saw before, is a, let's say, it fosters this feeling of improving the well-being of the space. I would like to conclude this biophilic introduction by this quote from David Thoreau: "In the wilderness is the salvation of the world." Wilderness, well, conceived as nature. What he meant when he described this is that he believes that in nature, well, by reconnected by the human to nature, we can save, let's say, our planet. In the last decades, actually, the urge to connect with nature has been developed through green system, both exterior and interior, as we saw in many projects in the last year. But what is actually the main drive that brings us to reconnect with nature is actually one of the fundamental questions that many philosophers and biologists are asking. We live in a time, geological era, that is called Anthropocene, that certifies, let's say, the effect of the human being on the planet. This map represents actually the ecological footprint of global hectares per person on the planet. You see how it is deformed compared to what it actually is in reality. So I think, and this is what also the mission of my company is try to merge again nature and the built environment through architecture. And I would like to conclude also with this image that I often use as a reference, because it actually merges the nature, because this is actually roots of a tree that are used in India to build bridges. And this provides actually infrastructure with a natural ever-growing element, which is a metaphor for us architects, which I think, and urban planners, which we have a massive responsibility over the safeguarding this planet we have. So teşekkürler to everybody.
I was saying thank you very much for this inspiring presentation, Giacomo. It was really interesting to see freebooters' use of light, as each home's light changes every minute of every day and even seasonally. However, it made me wonder about the building's heating and cooling requirements. Are there any special precautions towards different air conditions? And if so, how efficient and effective they are in terms of low energy consumption?
Yeah, the facade is used specific glass that is actually filtering the rays of the sun, and also mechanical ventilation together with natural ventilation. They provide perfect cooling and system throughout the year. So we actually used a very natural way to solve this. Together also with the positioning and the size of the louvers, optimization of the conditions inside the building is provided.
Giacomo, I'll switch to Turkish from now on, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure.
Again, thank you. Hope to host you again in another event. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Giacomo Garziano'ya sunumu ve cevapları için çok teşekkür ediyoruz. Tekrar görüşmek üzere. Şimdilik hoşça kalın diyorum.